Hello, Winner's Circle. I'm Alex McDonnell, competitive intel at Airtable, and I've got some thoughts and tools to share with you on how to bring your competitive insights to your product teams. To start, a common sort of question or concern that I hear from competitive intel folks or product marketers is how do we influence the product roadmap? And depending on how kind of healthy those relationships are, sometimes it can actually end up being quite us versus them and create a lot of defensiveness and finger pointing. We don't think product's doing the right things. We don't think they're listening. Our insights just go into a black box. And I want us to actually start there. I want to offer you the idea that product teams are dealing with hundreds or thousands of different inputs to come up with their product plans, with their product roadmap. Think about everything from obviously customer insights, sales requests, executive team and founder vision, and of course, things like the competitive landscape. But it's one on a list of many, many inputs, support tickets, all these other things. So they have a very difficult job. And so our starting point should be empathy. I really want to urge product marketers and CI people to bring that empathetic mindset when working with all teams, but in this special case of your product teams, don't come in too hot, right? Here's an example. If you've done something like win-loss research, ideally your product team and all other stakeholders would have been involved in that from the beginning to come up with the questions in the research brief. Let's say they weren't. And now you're just coming in hot with this finding of, here's all the reasons we lose and here's all the features that we need to build. That's very prone to create kind of defensiveness, right? If you're not quite having that respect for all the different inputs that they're dealing with and the complexity of their work. So start with empathy when working with your product teams and all teams with competitive insights. And maybe try to shift the mindset from, this is a lesson I've had to learn, but shift it from trying to influence them and move towards supporting them, working with them. So there are two big ways that we do that at Airtable. If you think about as one of the many inputs that go into the product planning process, we're not perfect at it yet, but it's roughly a half-year timeline where we'll deliver an updated view of the competitive landscape. And I'm going to show you what, in general, that looks like. The product team goes and does their incredibly difficult job of distilling all these inputs and all these competing needs and interests down into a clear product roadmap. And out the other side comes some prioritized list of initiatives. Once those initiatives are formalized, we're just starting to kind of form, we can plug in with competitive deep dives with each of those product teams. And typically they're starting to form into a team of a product manager, designer, an engineering lead, maybe a researcher as well. And we can link up with those groups to go that next level deeper into how competitors solve or don't solve those problems today, whether we're trying to close a competitive gap or extend a competitive differentiator. So let me take you through what each of those two look like. I'll start with the big picture one, the competitive landscape. So we use a tool here that we call the market map. It's this visual diagram that answers where does everybody play today and where do we think they are going? So what we like to do is just create a box, and a digital whiteboarding tool like Miro is awesome for this, for each kind of major capability in your space, in your category. I can't quite do this for you or give you an exact formula on how to do this. It's going to be unique to your space. I'm going to give you a couple examples in a minute, but it should definitely be bigger than the feature level. And you can then kind of visualize how those things relate to each other. Maybe there's a bit of a kind of a linear sequence of the work that happens in your product, right? So you might go left to right. Maybe it's more of a kind of a constant circle of the nature of the work that happens in your product. And then you also want to take this chance when you're looking big picture to kind of augment that view with more indirect competitors, especially if some of your more familiar competitors are looking to those adjacent spaces to expand. And so I've kind of roughly represented that here as, maybe the red competitor here is looking at an adjacency to this capability in the middle. This is all abstract, of course, just to give you the idea. And then maybe both of us are kind of looking at a new space that kind of hangs off of what we currently do. So this should really feel like a recap exercise. Hopefully this shouldn't feel like something that requires a lot of totally new work. I mean, stepping out to that big picture might be a bit of a different mindset than what we end up in day to day. But in terms of collecting the information, if you've got that heartbeat of your competitive news and newsletters and win-loss insights coming in, this is really just a chance to kind of recap and refresh on all those. I can't show you my examples, but I can show you a few that are out there in the world. This is one from the digital design space. This is from a third-party researcher, actually, who does a survey on what tools designers use for each major step in their workflow. And there's actually like 8 or 9, but just for simplicity, I'm just showing a few here. So they include major capabilities, right? Not features, but bigger blocks of functionality, such as digital whiteboarding, UI design, prototyping. And then in their case, they're kind of showing a prominence or a ranking here based on popularity. Figma, obviously super successful, just acquired for 20B. So they've taken over a lot of this design tool space, and that's shown here with their prominence. And then for each of these capabilities, there's other solutions that kind of fall into place there. That's one way to represent it. This is one from GitLab. GitLab has a super public philosophy around everything they do, including competitive. And so GitLab has this point of view around the DevOps kind of life cycle or the DevOps journey. And it comes down to these 10 kind of jobs to be done. And again, I like how simple these are, right? These are not super detailed or even feature level. These are kind of higher level capabilities than that. This is kind of an external promotion tool for them as well. So, okay, fine. They're showing themselves in a favorable light here, going all the way across all 10 jobs, whereas GitHub, in their view, has some gaps here, and Azure has some gaps as well. And then they start to layer in a few point solutions that maybe just do part of the job here. So one thing that maybe is missing from GitLab's example here is a sense of how well each of these players do this job. I don't want to get into like, again, feature comparison or like the Harvey Ball thing, but is there one player in each of these jobs that has a clear advantage or a clear strength? But that just gives you another example. And this one is an example from the learning technology space. This comes from an analyst. A little bit of a different approach here. Rather than just laying out all the jobs or kind of groups of functionality linearly, there's actually kind of this sense of these different categories of capabilities building on each other. So at the bottom, there's the LMS platform, which is more like, these are more like the source of truth type systems or system of record. And then there's more these systems of engagement that sit on top of that. So if this is the nature of your market, this might be an approach that you want to take. And you'll see in these cases, he kind of names a few of the top competitors and players that are in each of these buckets. So that's the market map. It should feel like hopefully a fairly light lift exercise. I would say try to keep it simple, especially if it's your first time doing it. Elevate to like 4 to 10 at most, a lot kind of boxes of functionality. Don't go feature level, and just plot out, who's playing where and who has general strengths where, and then give a sense of who's moving where, right? Like if a competitor just had a new acquisition or a new product launch in an adjacent area, make sure that's clear that that's new, like that's their next frontier where they're trying to go. Cool. Okay, so let's move over then to the competitive deep dive. So again, if we pop back here, this is after the kind of overall product roadmap has been defined and some of these specific initiatives are starting to be formed. This is where we want to go a little deeper and get a little more specific. So here's the ideal flow for these. The product team, that's your product manager, design lead, engineering lead, sometimes a user researcher in there as well, should be able to bring some kind of high level focus, general problem statement for what we're trying to solve. And they're open questions. We really want to hear where the uncertainty is. Where do we want to learn a little more about how this problem is currently being solved or failing to be solved today? Then what we can do is scan our existing library of research, again, whether that's win-loss or other user research that's been done. And we can start with the kind of the most accessible type of competitive intel, which is just what's on the web, right? So this is looking at support docs, reviews, App Store, all those things that, we talk about as kind of part of the digital footprint of competitors. Make sure you go and kind of cast that wide net. Then we'll bring that into a structured format, which I'm going to show you in a second, and have a discussion around it. That allows us to form an initial kind of loosely held competitive point of view. Hey, in this product area, in this problem area, we believe that competitors are strong here, but they're missing here, and we can create differentiation by investing in this way. That's what I mean by a point of view, kind of a stance on what the opportunity is in this area. And the next best step is almost always to take that and bring a better set of questions than we would have had if we had not done this exercise into some kind of actual user testing or benchmarking or prototyping of some kind. And that's where it kind of goes back into the product team's hands. So let me show you what the kind of structured analysis that goes into this stage right here between the web research and anything that we can pull in from our existing research, what we know about how well competitors kind of solve or don't solve these problems today. We use Airtable to do it. And we've really been starting to build this out, and it's really given us this incredibly rich source of truth on all of our competitors' capabilities. And I'm going to present a really kind of simplified, let me move my head here, a really simplified version of that, but hopefully I can allude to the level of kind of sophistication that you can get to here. Okay, so what we're looking at here in Airtable is what we call an interface, which is just a visual way of looking at data with a picker on the left side here. So across different product areas and capabilities and features within those capabilities, we can browse through how well we and our competitors do each of these things. And each of these records, each of these kind of entries in the database, if you will, can have whatever criteria are relevant to you. I've just kind of done it simply here where you can have a picker of, your general assessment of how strong this is, strong, partial, weak. Maybe they don't do it at all. Maybe it's coming on the roadmap. It's a section for free text notes, and then a section to link your sources for any web research. But what I love about this is how visual it can be, especially when you've got designers in the room for that discussion. You can pull in screenshots here, and you can actually leave like annotated comments. And so I've just pulled an example of Miro functionality of @mentioning in Miro. Let's say we were a Miro competitor and we wanted to know how well they were doing this. And we could say, okay, I'll actually leave a comment here, interesting UX choice. And I could tag other people in Airtable, kind of meta, because this is about @mentioning. But I can leave that comment. And then that's there for us to kind of have a discussion around. And we can do this live. You can tab through multiple screenshots for a single feature. So it's kind of like the same type of knowledge that you would get by building out a feature comparison, chart in a spreadsheet or something. But it's almost like you can click into each cell and get all this additional context and detail. So that's what it looks like for any individual kind of feature for a certain competitor or player. And you should definitely do this analysis for yourself as well. And then you can just keep building it out. So under each feature, you can have as many competitors as you need, as you wish, and kind of make their assessments and do that for all these different features. So this is the interface view. This is kind of the visual surface that you can use to have the discussion around. I'll just show you also what it looks like a little bit kind of behind the scenes. So this is the database view in Airtable. So each of these records represents how well a competitor provides a certain capability. And so you can have many different features, group those into many different product areas. Again, thinking back to your market map, what are those different kind of buckets of functionality or categories of capability that you provide? And then go as deep as you want. And there's no need to provide an analysis on every competitor for every feature. Maybe certain competitors only do part of the picture well. And so you just focus your analysis there. So if I wanted to add another record here, I'm doing some things with formulas on the naming convention, but for competitor 1 and, thing Z here is an example I put in. You can even add an additional field to get even more specific within a feature. You can get as kind of granular as you want within your hierarchy. Partial, this is where I would add screenshots and then any notes. But this is how it just kind of keeps building out. New product area, a new thing that we do. So back to the interface, now there's 2 product areas and you can kind of open and close these things, but another product area, another capability, and another competitor. Cool. So I hope that gives you a sense of the kind of structured, but still flexible and very visual package that you can deliver to your product teams for these competitive deep dives. And of course, think about, for each of these, right? It shouldn't just be the web research. You could add other fields here for insights from, win-loss research. This has come up as a loss driver. Maybe that's just what informs your measure of assessment. So it's not just a subjective judgment based on, what you saw on the web. You can include other packaging and pricing insights in here also. If you've got, features that are only available on your competitor's enterprise plan, but you're making them available to all users, that's kind of a type of differentiation as well. So I hope that gives you a sense of how this can create a really rich discussion with your product team. I'll kind of zip back out just to recap. We talked about these 2 main ways that we can support our product teams, both as an input to the overall process, and then as things are getting built and as these teams are starting to form, hopefully still fairly early in the process where there's still a lot of open questions and not everything feels totally defined yet. we can provide that next input of the competitive deep dive. So good luck supporting and not trying to influence your product teams with these two tools. I'll make that competitive capabilities Airtable template available to everyone who attended, and see you in a second for the live Q&A.